This video is sponsored by Morning Brew. If like me you wake up and don't have time to browse countless news websites and social media to keep up to date with all of the various news cycles, Morning Brew is the newsletter for you. Morning Brew is a free daily newsletter delivered to your inbox Monday to Sunday. These informative newsletters are much more snappy, witty and relevant to you than traditional news media, and you can be up to date with the latest business, finance and tech news in just 5 minutes. I enjoy the interesting articles like this piece about the mechanics of seizing super yachts that I just wouldn't find anywhere else. Morning Brew is free and takes 15 seconds to subscribe, so there's no reason not to give it a try. Subscribe for the latest daily news on business, finance and technology by clicking the link in the description below. It's 8 PM in the evening of May 17th, 1987. The USS Stark, an Oliver Hazard Perry-class guided missile frigate, is on a routine patrol through international waters in the Persian Gulf. Captain Glenn Brindle is preoccupied with preparing his vessel to be handed over to a new commanding officer in 6 days, when the Stark receives a message from a US Air Force E-3 AWACS. The AWACS has picked up an Iraqi aircraft on radar, approaching Stark's location from the northwest. Captain Brindle and his officers aren't worried. The AWACS has classified the contact as a friendly strike aircraft, and Brindle goes back to work preparing his ship. However, the Stark's Command Information Center continues to track the contact as it draws closer. The situation in the Persian Gulf is far more dangerous than Brindle's relaxed attitude would suggest. Saddam Hussein's Iraqi government has been engaged in a brutal war with neighbouring Iran for the last 7 years. This conflict has now spilled over to the Persian Gulf, where both sides intensify what is known as the Tanker War. Beginning in 1984, commerce shipping passing through the Straits of Hormuz has been increasingly targeted by both combatants as they attempt to strangle each other economically. To keep the situation from spiralling out of control, the United States has deployed naval assets to the region to escort commercial vessels to their destinations. Although the US government is officially neutral in the war, the US has been covertly aiding the Iraqis. President Ronald Reagan's administration is alarmed by Iranian territorial expansion, and tensions are still high after the 1979 revolution, which toppled the US-backed Shah. The Iraqi aircraft on radar is on a rare nighttime mission, but is following a common route towards Iranian shipping lanes. American naval officers have nicknamed this part of the Gulf Mirage Alley, and keep their ships out of the Iraqi-mandated exclusion zone. However, Iraqi attacks have been slowly creeping into international waters in recent weeks. The Stark's radar now shows the aircraft has closed to within 70 miles of their location, but is set to pass 11 miles to their north. The AWACS calls up 2 Saudi Arabian F-15 Eagle fighters, but does not order them to intercept the Iraqi jet. The radar blip is flying erratically, and the American officers joke that the pilot must be a new recruit. While the US Navy reports after the incident would identify the aircraft as a Mirage, it is most likely the secret Iraqi development of the Dassault Falcon 50 civilian private jet to carry Exocet missiles, codenamed Susanna. Likely desperate to get rid of his heavy load of missiles, knowing that pilots are being punished for returning to base with their Exocets, the Iraqi pilot searches for a nearby potential target. When the Falcon is 43 miles away, the Stark's Tactical Action Officer, Lieutenant Basil Moncrief, considers transmitting a standard warning on the military air distress frequency, but decides against it. For the next few minutes, nobody on the Stark seems to notice the Iraqi aircraft is now flying directly at the guided missile frigate. At 9:07 PM, the Falcon's pilot launches one of his Exocets at a range of 22 miles. The missile drops free before igniting and streaking towards the Stark at 550 miles per hour. A minute later, he launches the second Exocet from 15 miles away. A forward lookout spots a bright flash on the horizon, but assumes that it is light reflecting off the surface of the water. At the same time, Lieutenant Moncrief finally orders the standard warning broadcast to the Falcon. The message goes out: "Unknown aircraft, this is a US Navy warship. Request you identify yourself, over." There is no response. A minute later, the electronic warfare technician briefly hears a steady, high-pitched signal coming through his headphones for 10 seconds before the signal disappears. It is in fact the first missile locking onto its target. Because radar has failed to detect the Exocet, the men aboard the Stark still have no idea the danger they are in, although as a precaution, Lieutenant Moncrief sends a crewman to arm the chaff launchers, while he moves to activate the Phalanx close-in weapon system. The Exocets are now skimming the top of the Persian Gulf just 10 feet above the water. Another warning is broadcast to the Falcon, but the Stark still receives no response. Lieutenant Moncrief orders the fire control technician to lock on to the Iraqi aircraft to scare it away, not knowing that it is far too late for such measures. Moncrief also brings the Sea-Whiz online, but only to standby mode, meaning it will not automatically engage the incoming missiles. Seconds before impact, the forward lookout spots a nearby fog bank turn blue with missile exhaust and screams into the phone circuit, "Missile inbound," before diving on the deck. The first Exocet rockets out of the fog and impacts the Stark's port side. The missile easily punches through the frigate's unarmoured hull, with pieces slicing all the way out of the starboard side. Amazingly, the warhead fails to detonate and comes to a rest in a passageway. Unfortunately, the missile's motor still has plenty of fuel, which causes a massive fire inside the berthing compartment. Many crewmen are killed. After the initial shock, Captain Brindle sounds general quarters, only for the second missile to strike 30 seconds after the first. This time, the Exocet's warhead explodes and blows a massive hole in the Stark's superstructure. The frigate is now ablaze and has lost steering control as well as radio communications. Inside, men fight for their lives before they can be engulfed by the inferno. Firefighters train their hoses on the flames, only to find the fire is so hot that water vapour evaporates into steam as soon as it touches the flame. In some parts of the ship, the fire reaches 3000 degrees Fahrenheit, and the hull glows red in the darkness. Crewmen Timothy Porter and Timothy Gable are forced to jump overboard while the still moving Stark steams away from them. In the combat systems berthing, electronics technician Wayne Weaver pulls a dozen men to safety before succumbing to smoke inhalation. He will be posthumously awarded the Navy and Marine Medal for Heroism. While the crew is battling the fire, radio men manage to improvise a long-range radio transmitter using the helicopter's survival radios. News of the Stark's dire condition reaches other Navy vessels who race off to help, but do not arrive for another 5 hours. Meanwhile, Porter and Gable float in the Persian Gulf, with Porter recalling, "I was praying for the sun to come up. When the sun came up and I saw the sharks, I wanted the sun to go down." They will be rescued later by a Bahraini search and rescue helicopter. In the early hours of the next morning, the guided missile destroyer USS Wardell comes to the USS Stark's aid, along with nearby tugboats. Together, they manage to bring the fire under control, and the Stark's crew is finally relieved at 5 PM on May the 18th. The fire is out by the following day, and the crippled frigate is towed to port in Bahrain. 37 men, a fifth of the crew, have been killed by the missile strikes. The Exocet strike on the USS Stark marks the deadliest attack on a US Navy ship since the USS Liberty incident in 1967. Saddam Hussein's government offers an official apology, as well as financial compensation to the victims' families. The fate of the Iraqi pilot continues to be a source of debate. It is uncertain whether he was executed by Hussein's regime, or is still alive today. The Stark will be repaired and returned to active duty in 1991, before being decommissioned in 1999. The Stark disaster does not mark the end of American involvement in the tanker war. A year later, tensions between the United States and Iran will finally boil over when another US Navy frigate's attempt to transit the Gulf will trigger a one-day war between the two nations.